Aloha, I'm Diane Wilson with the Hawaii Writers Guild. Welcome to Write On, a series of videos providing education and inspiration for all of you writers out there. Today's guest is our very own Hawaii Island published author, Darien Hsu Gee, and she's going to be talking with us about generating writing ideas. Welcome to Darien, and can you start by telling us a bit about yourself?
Sure. So thanks for having me. It's really always nice to be with fellow Hawaii writers. I've been living here with my family for almost 21 years. We're on the Big Island. We were in Waimea for about 16 years, and now we're in the Waikoloa area to get a little bit more sun. I am a novelist. I have 5 novels out with Penguin Random House, 3 under the name Mia King, 2 under my name. A couple of books did really well, so they're in a bunch of different countries and different languages. So that was kind of a fun thing to be able to do. All of my writing happened also, by the way, while I've been living in Hawaii. It wasn't actually published before I moved here. So that was all writing and efforts and finding an agent and all of those processes as I was here doing it from afar. So I know what it's like to kind of feel like we're a little isolated out here, but it can be done. I recently did a sort of creative pivot where I moved more into creative nonfiction and essays and personal essays and memoir. I've been teaching these areas for a while, but I actually hadn't published or written my own work or shared it until last year. I also had a poetry chapbook come out last year with the Poetry Society of America. It was part of a fellowship that I won, excuse me, a couple years ago. So I've had the opportunity to do a lot of different things in terms of genre. So fiction, nonfiction, creative nonfiction, poetry. And then I also have a craft book out on how to write the memoir. It's actually how to write the Hawaii memoir with Watermark Publishing, which is a local publisher. So I've also been fortunate enough to publish with the large big 6, big 5 traditional houses as well as regional houses, Hawaii. I've indie published and I have done hybrid publishing. So I've done a little bit of everything. So I'm happy to talk about that with you, Diane, and share what I know with your members.
Great. I can tell you already we're going to need to have you on a second time because you have a wealth of knowledge. So, but let's start. We have a variety of writers watching who are just starting to write. So, what suggestions do you have for new writers to help them generate writing ideas?
You know, I have 2 ideas or 2 recommendations, and I should say they're strong recommendations. Of course, there's so many ways to come to this work and to do this sort of what I call this practice of writing. But for me, I feel like the number one thing is, especially if you're writing fiction or memoirs, that you really need to be a reader. Those are, I think I actually was not an English major in college. I didn't actually take any writing classes or anything like that. I got my MFA when I was 50 and I'd already been published. So it was kind of like I did things backwards, but I was always a huge reader. And it wasn't like any highbrow lit. It was just like things like Judy Blume, you know, things that I really enjoyed growing up with. So just find something that you really love and read it and read a lot of it. And maybe even find things that you may not love, but either come highly recommended or you know have hit a list only because usually there's something that you can learn as a writer through that. So when you're reading, there's 2 ways to read. One is to read as a reader. So it's just, you're enjoying it. You're just thinking this is a great story. You're connected with the characters. The other thing to do is to actually start reading it as a writer. And that's where you start to transition from just somebody who maybe casually reads to somebody who's like, I'm going to take this book and see what I can learn about writing from this book. I mean, it's your own mini free master class. So that's my first tip is to read, because that will teach you more faster than anything else you can do. The second thing is that you need to have a daily or at least a consistent writing practice. It doesn't have to be long. The idea is that you're just showing up. So it doesn't matter if it's 10 minutes a day. 10 minutes a day, 4 or 5 times a week is much more powerful for me than somebody writing once a week for an hour. Even if they end up with the same number of words at the end of that week. It's that consistency that's going to help you develop your voice, help you develop your craft. So those are the 2 things that I would say for anyone starting out. Read, but read both as a reader. If you really enjoy a book, then you want to back and look at that same work as a writer. So you actually want to, you know, kind of put your writer lens on and be like, how did they do that? What is he or she doing with dialogue here? You know, what is the setting? Where did I start to feel some tension? Like start to really dissect it. And then the other thing, as I said, was to is to find a way that writing becomes a regular part of your life. And then when you're calling yourself a writer, you're like, yeah, because I write every day. Or I write 3 times a week. I'm a writer because I'm actually writing, which is always the problem because so many writers actually don't write. We get blocked or we get intimidated or we just get busy. So writing is what we want to be doing.
Right. Excellent. Great. Thank you. I know one of the topics that many new writers start with is themselves because it's the subject that they know the best. I understand that you have started a micro memoir writing program. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, so I partnered with Legacy Isle Publishing, which is an imprint of Watermark Publishing in Honolulu, to come up with what we're calling a micro memoir writing and hybrid publishing program. So what it is it's a way for writers to, if they wanted to, there's two programs, two tracks. One is they're both self-guided, but one is a basic one. So that's for writers who know exactly what they want to do. They just maybe want a little bit of guidance and then they want to see their work published under our imprint, which is called the Halia Aloha line or the Halia Aloha series, which means cherished memories. And then we have our signature package, which people will then work with me and get the support that a lot of writers don't always feel like they get when they're trying to write their memoir. So that includes, a lot of daily work or regular prompts. It includes some formatting of how they organize their time, how they organize their work. I do read work for the first few months, and then I do a final developmental of their entire manuscript, and then we actually put it into production. And we're using something called the micro memoir format, which is short form. So if you've heard of Flash, Flash is anywhere between 750 to 1,000 words or less. Micro is even smaller. It's about 250 to 300 words. And the idea here is that you're just distilling a moment, a relationship, a scene into the most, I guess, impactful or whatever shines or burns brightest in that moment is what we're going for. And what's great about that is that it's becoming really popular. So we're seeing a lot of short form memoirs and even novels and all sorts of different essays have been doing this for a while. Prose poetry has been doing this for a while, but we're seeing it more and more in the marketplace, which I think is really important if anybody's actually ever thinking of sharing their work, beyond their circle. It's a form that people actually know and look forward to reading. And part of it's because if you do any kind of social media, right, you post a picture and you have 250 characters in which to write a caption. So you have to think, what do I want to say about this? What's most important? So we do that on the literary front by saying what's going on in this moment and what is it that you want the reader to know. And it's actually very generous to the reader because it gives them a chance to dive into your story and have this moment with you and then come back out and then either keep reading or come back to it later. It's just a way to do these sort of vignettes or snapshots of your life in a way that doesn't feel intimidating for a lot of writers who don't know how to capture their whole life in one manuscript. So it's about, at the end of the day, about 20,000 words. So maybe about a third to a quarter less. So it's about this big. I should have had a copy with me. I'm sorry. We have 3 books out already. But it's super achievable. And our production team is excellent. And they will actually, the cover, everything in terms of the interior is all formatted to our series, which I'm curating or I'm editing. So when it goes out, you kind of go out with that sort of label over the work. And you've had eyes on the work and you've kind of been crafting and working with me and working on your own to develop the work. So it's just a way to help people tell their stories. And our focus, of course, is people in Hawaii, either people who've moved here, but anyone who calls Hawaii home. So that was sort of the idea behind it.
Okay. Really sounds exciting and unique. So, a lot of our members have written a memoir. They still want to write, but now they're stuck on, I've already written the one thing I know, which is myself. Now, what do I write on? Do you have suggestions for them about how to move forward with their writing?
I guess it depends on if they want to write another memoir, right? Because a memoir is not an autobiography. A memoir is just a slice of life. So if you look at Shirley MacLaine, right, you can have like 10 memoirs out about your life. So it just depends on what feels important to you. If you're looking at moving into a different genre, then of course there are lots of classes and workshops and free prompts online that you can do to start writing. My thing is that I feel like if you're a writer and you're paying attention, you're going to start noticing the kinds of stories that want you to listen to them. And they may be your own stories, they may be your mother's stories. I just finished a collection of the women in my matrilineal line. And some of these women I don't know, and we have very little information about in our family, which made me even more compelled to find a way to remember them by including them in this collection. And so, if you're paying, I feel like if you listen and you get into that practice of writing regularly, then you might be like, God, that's so interesting. That one thing that happened, what is that? And so, even if you don't know what it is yet, like you don't have the whole plot figured out, you don't even know if there's a story there, but you're curious and you follow it with your writing, you do some prompts or some daily free writing with that. I think it's going to reveal itself to you. I mean, I have a lot of faith in that. I believe that honestly, great writers are never necessarily out of material. It's just a matter of what you want to publish, which is completely different, right? There's the art of writing and there's the business of writing. So, as far as the art of writing goes, I feel like you just kind of show up at your desk or at your table with your notebook or your laptop. And you either, if you don't know where to go, then you can use a bunch of prompts. And the thing about a prompt you have to realize is that I love prompts. And prompts are not about necessarily what the question is that the prompt is asking. So, for example, if it says write about apple pie, like that's it, right? And you go, I don't really have anything with apple pie. I don't even. I mean, I'm writing a memoir right now. I don't even want to put anything about apple pie in my memoir. But when you start writing with that prompt, what happens is it's going to start sort of revealing the thing that actually wants to come up, that for whatever reason isn't coming up because you're overthinking it, because maybe you've got your own ego involved. And so, really, what becomes the prompt, well, I don't have anything to write about apple pie. I don't know. Maybe I went to McDonald's. That apple pie I've had for years, which is always deep fried. And I hate stuff that's deep fried. But I do like things when I go to the fair that's deep fried. I've had those deep fried Twinkies, which reminds me of a time in 1975 when I was with my grandfather. And then all of a sudden, we've gone from apple pie with zero relevance to this moment, this snapshot with the grandfather at a fair. And you and there could still be something more there. I mean, even beyond that, right? So that's the discovery that I've always loved as both a fiction writer and an essayist and memoirist, right? Is that what is that? That curiosity. So I would say that if you're curious, if you can, and if you're not, then cultivate some curiosity. Ask what's going on with that. I wonder what if, right? So let's say that you have an idea. So this is a great. Let's say that you're blocked and you're working on a novel or what they call autofiction. So it's a novel based on your real life about, let's just say, a woman who goes sailing, right? She wants to sail, I don't know, between Maui and the Big Island, we'll just say, right? And it's just not working, right? And so that's where you start doing the what if. What if her boat gets stolen the week before this is fiction, is about to launch? What if someone from her past shows up, right? What if, and you keep doing these what ifs and you write them out. You write out these little mini scenes and you don't care if it's going to end up in your story eventually. You just write them to see where they go. And that curiosity, I feel like, will unlock the story that you might have an opportunity to get to know and possibly share on the page. So it's just kind of like a digging around and staying open and, and just being like, okay, where am I going to go with this? You could actually write the same prompt maybe 5 or 6 different times and have completely different writing from that. So, lots of free prompts on the web, but go through a photo, go through an old photo album. Here's a photo of my mother when she was actually much younger than me studying in college. You can look at that photo and be like, what's going on with this photo? What's happening outside the frame of this photo that I can't see? Who's taking this picture? What is she wearing? Right? What is she looking at? And again, it's not about whether or not you're going to use it, right, in your novel or your memoir. It's about you becoming more familiar with where stories show up for you. And it's training your eye to look at where stories might want to say, hello, pay attention to me.
Mhm.
I want some of your eyes on me for a little while. So
Great ideas. Thanks so much. My last major question for you has to do with dialogue. A lot of
mhm.
folks use dialogue in their writing, and a lot of folks struggle with using dialogue in their writing. Can you share some tips that can help people to write good dialogue?
um, I have a few like sort of golden rules about dialogue. The first is keep your dialogue tags super simple. So people like to make the dialogue more exciting by adding a lot of dialogue tags that are, you know, dialogue tags are, he said, he yelled, he murmured, he whispered, right? So those are sort of the basic ones. And everyone always feels like, new writers especially feel like, oh, those are so boring. But actually, plain writing is usually best, at least in the earlier drafts. And you want to use things like he whooped or he screeched or she yammed. I mean, those kinds of dialogue tags you want to use sparingly or not at all, because they're trying to do the work that really the dialogue itself and the action or description needs to be doing. So keep your dialogue tags simple. Avoid difficult accent or slang. I know that maybe you have a character who might have a certain inflection. If you don't know how to get it right, and if you have to ask the question, then you probably don't know how to get it right, right? If you're like, I wonder if I'm getting this right, then you probably aren't getting it right. I would say just again, revert back to plain English or simple language and go from there. Um, Always read the dialogue out loud and don't read it, like you're doing some Shakespearean, play. Read it as if you're having a conversation and figure out what works or what doesn't. When you hear it, sometimes you go, oh yeah, I would never say that, or I would never say that. Again, this is where reading is really helpful because reading lets you see how dialogue shows up on the page. I mean, dialogue has a very specific purpose, in my view. It really has to do one of two things. It has to reveal character or it has to advance the action. If it doesn't do any of that, then you have to ask yourself why it's in there. It can't be in there because you feel like you need dialogue. If you need dialogue, find some dialogue that's going to do something. But really, the easiest way to get good at dialogue is to read because you'll see it a lot and then you'll be like, oh yeah, now that makes sense.
Okay, great. Good suggestions. So, speaking of suggestions, here's your chance. Do you have any final suggestions for our viewers out there?
Um, well, for both advanced and beginner writers, it's still going to be, find a way to have a consistent and regular writing schedule. I don't think I can emphasize that enough. I really feel like that makes a really big difference. And same thing to also read. The other thing I would say too is that if you're not feeling confident about your writing just yet, I would be, I love community and I think that there's a place for sharing your work. I would just say to share your work when you feel like it's at a point where you are in need of certain kind of feedback. And when you need that feedback, and I think you guys have the structure pretty well established, but for anyone who might be new, is to let people know what kind of feedback you're getting from them. Don't just give them the manuscript and be like, tell me what you think. Give them the manuscript and say, let me know what you think about, and maybe name 1, 2, 3 things, right? So that, because sometimes when we give people our work, they think they have to find something, right? They're going to get their red pen and they're going to mark it up, even if there's not really a problem. And it's just one person's opinion, and it may actually not even be right. So the idea of feedback, in my view, is always to give you more information about what you want to do, not about what people say. Oh, I didn't like that. I didn't really like that character. Instead of saying, oh, they didn't like that character, I'll get rid of them. You'll say, oh, I didn't like the character. They didn't like the character. I wonder why. And then you put on your writer hat, your editor hat, and you go in and you try to figure it out. So anyways, I hope that helps.
Okay. I would say it helps a lot. I would like to thank you for sharing your thoughts with us today. And for more information about Darien, our viewers can go to www.dariengee.com, and we will post that website on the screen here. For more information about the Hawaii Writers Guild, you can go to www.hawaiiwritersguild.com and write on. Thank you.